Why your brain won't stop caring what others think. Imagine this. You're standing in line at a Starbucks in downtown Manhattan, and you suddenly realize you're wearing mismatched socks. Your heart starts racing. Your palms get sweaty. You're convinced everyone behind you is staring at your feet, judging your life choices, probably posting about it on their Instagram stories. Sound familiar? Welcome to the exhausting world of caring way too much about what other people think. And here's the thing, your brain is literally wired to do this to you. It's not your fault, but it is your problem to solve. Thousands of years ago, when our ancestors were living in small tribes, being accepted by the group wasn't just nice to have. It was literally life or death. Get kicked out of the tribe, and you would face starvation, wild animals, and certain doom. So our brains evolved this incredibly sensitive alarm system that goes off whenever we might be at risk of social rejection. The problem? That alarm system is still running the same software from 50,000 years ago, but we're living in 2025. Now, don't get me wrong, fitting in still has some serious benefits. In my 20s, being part of the right social circles was like having a VIP pass to life. Better parties, more dating opportunities, and let's be honest, way more fun. Even today, having a solid social network can help you land jobs, find someone to help you move your couch, or just have people to call when life gets tough. These aren't small things. But here's where it gets tricky. We've turned this survival mechanism into a 24/7 anxiety machine. We're not just worried about our close friends and family anymore, we're stressed about what the barista thinks of our coffee order, what strangers on social media think of our vacation photos, and whether the person next to us on the subway approves of our outfit choice. The ancient Stoics had a revolutionary idea about this whole mess. They said that what other people think about you is completely outside your control. And if it's outside your control, then worrying about it is just a waste of your mental energy. Think about it, you can't reach into someone else's brain and change their opinion of you. You can't control whether they like your haircut, approve of your career choices, or think you're funny. What you can control is how you show up in the world, how you treat people, and whether you're living according to your own values. The Stoics called things like reputation and social approval preferred indifference. Basically, they're nice to have, but they're not necessary for living a good life. What is necessary? Living with courage, wisdom, justice, and self-discipline. So here's the million-dollar question. What if you could learn to strategically not give a damn about the opinions that don't matter, while still caring deeply about the things that do? What if you could free up all that mental energy you're currently spending on worrying about strangers and redirect it toward building something meaningful? That's exactly what we're going to explore. Because the goal isn't to become a sociopath who doesn't care about anything. It's to become someone who cares about the right things, in the right amounts, for the right reasons. 1. When caring actually hurts you, the hidden cost of people-pleasing. Let me tell you about Sarah, a marketing manager in Chicago who spent 3 hours every morning getting ready for work. Not because she loved fashion or enjoyed the process, but because she was terrified that someone might think she looked unprofessional. She'd change outfits 4 times, redo her makeup twice, and still feel anxious walking into the office. Sarah was paying a price she didn't even realize, and it was way higher than she thought. Here's the brutal truth about caring too much. It's not just exhausting, it's actually sabotaging your life in ways you might not even notice. When you're constantly worried about what everyone else thinks, you're essentially handing over the remote control of your life to a bunch of people who probably aren't even paying attention to you in the first place. Think about the last time you wanted to speak up in a meeting but didn't because you were worried people might think your idea was stupid. Or when you stayed at a party you weren't enjoying because you didn't want to seem antisocial. Or when you agreed to help someone move on your only free weekend because saying no felt too uncomfortable. Each of these moments represents a tiny betrayal of yourself, and they add up fast. The hidden costs of people-pleasing are everywhere. There's the financial cost, buying clothes you can't afford to impress people you don't even like, going to expensive restaurants because that's where the group wants to go, spending money on things that look good on social media rather than things that actually make you happy. There's the time cost, hours spent crafting the perfect text message, endless scrolling through social media to see how your posts are performing, showing up to events you don't want to attend. But the biggest cost is the opportunity cost, all the things you're not doing because you're too busy managing your image. The business you're not starting because you're afraid of what people will say if it fails. The relationship you're not ending because you're worried about what mutual friends will think. The creative project you're not pursuing because it doesn't fit with how people see you. I know a guy in Los Angeles who wanted to be a writer but worked in tech because it looked more impressive to his family. He spent years climbing the corporate ladder, getting promotions he didn't want, attending networking events that drained his soul. Meanwhile, his laptop sat at home with half-finished stories that no one would ever read. He was living someone else's definition of success while his own dreams collected dust. The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus understood this trap better than anyone. He was born a slave, became disabled, and eventually became one of the most respected teachers in Rome. Talk about someone who had every reason to care about what others thought. But here's what he said about reputation. You must watch, you must labor, you must get the better of certain appetites, must quit your acquaintance, be despised by your servant, be laughed at by those you meet, come off worse than others in everything. In magistracies, in honors, in courts of judicature. When you have considered all these things round, approach, if you please, if, by parting with them, you have a mind to purchase equanimity, freedom, and tranquility. In other words, Epictetus is saying, look, if you want real peace of mind, you need to be willing to let go of your reputation. You need to be okay with being misunderstood, criticized, even laughed at. This isn't because he was a masochist, it's because he understood that your reputation is not actually under your control. Here's the thing that most people don't get. Your reputation exists in other people's minds, not in reality. You can be the most generous, kind, intelligent person in the world and someone will still think you're selfish, mean, or stupid. You can also be genuinely terrible and have people think you're amazing. Your actual character, how you behave when no one is watching, how you treat people who can't do anything for you, whether you keep your promises to yourself, that's what's real. That's what's under your control. The Stoics had a term for things like reputation, social status, and what other people think of you. They called them preferred indifference. This means they're nice to have, but they're not necessary for living a good life. It's like having a nice car. Sure, it's pleasant, but you can live a perfectly fulfilling life taking the bus. You don't need everyone to like you to be happy, successful, or worthy of respect. What you do need is to live according to virtue, courage, wisdom, justice, and self-discipline. And here's the kicker, sometimes living virtuously means disappointing people. Sometimes it means saying no when everyone expects you to say yes. Sometimes it means standing up for what's right even when it's unpopular. Sometimes it means choosing your own path even when others don't understand it. Consider Marcus, a teacher in Miami who noticed his colleagues constantly complaining about students and parents. The negativity was toxic, but everyone participated because it was the social norm. Marcus made a choice. He stopped participating in the gossip sessions. Some colleagues thought he was being judgmental or antisocial. But Marcus realized he was protecting his own mental health and modeling the behavior he wanted to see. His reputation took a small hit, but his integrity remained intact. Let's go back to Sarah in Chicago. After months of exhaustion and anxiety, she decided to try an experiment. She started getting ready for work in 30 minutes instead of 3 hours. She wore clothes that were clean and appropriate but not perfect. She stopped checking her appearance in every reflective surface. You know what happened? Absolutely nothing. No one said anything. No one treated her differently. No one even seemed to notice. But Sarah noticed something incredible. She had an extra 2.5 hours every morning. She started going to the gym, reading books, making a real breakfast instead of grabbing a protein bar. She had energy for things that actually mattered to her. She realized she'd been solving a problem that didn't exist while creating real problems for herself. The most insidious part of people-pleasing is how it creates a vicious cycle. The more you try to control what others think, the more anxious you become about their opinions. The more anxious you become, the more you monitor their reactions. The more you monitor their reactions, the less authentic you become. And the less authentic you are, the more disconnected you feel from your own life. This is what happens when you start to understand the difference between what's in your control and what isn't. Other people's opinions? Not in your control. Your own actions, choices, and character? Completely in your control. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, you free up massive amounts of energy to focus on what actually matters. The question isn't whether people will judge you, they will. The question is whether you're going to let their judgment run your life. Because every minute you spend worrying about what someone else thinks is a minute you're not spending building the life you actually want. And that's the real tragedy of people-pleasing. It doesn't just waste your time, it wastes your entire life. 2. Look like crap and feel amazing. Why appearance anxiety is killing your confidence. Here's a confession. Most of the time when I go grocery shopping, I look absolutely terrible. Messy hair, old t-shirt, sometimes even pajama pants if I'm feeling particularly rebellious. And you know what? It's one of the most liberating things I do. While other people are spending an hour getting ready to buy milk and eggs, I'm already back home, groceries unpacked, living my life. But let me tell you about Jessica, a graphic designer in Brooklyn who couldn't leave her apartment without a full face of makeup, perfectly styled hair, and an outfit that looked like she was heading to a photo shoot. Going to the corner bodega for a soda became a 45-minute production. She was trapped in her own apartment by her appearance anxiety, and she didn't even realize it. This is the first Stoic exercise for building indifference to social judgment, deliberately looking less than perfect in public. Now, before you think I'm suggesting you show up to job interviews in your underwear, let me explain what this is really about. This exercise isn't about being inappropriate or unprofessional. It's about breaking the stranglehold that appearance anxiety has on your daily life. Most people have this completely backwards relationship with how they look in public. They think that looking perfect will make them feel confident, but actually the opposite is true. The more you depend on looking perfect to feel okay about yourself, the more anxious you become about your appearance. It's like being addicted to a drug. You need bigger and bigger doses to get the same effect. Think about it. When was the last time you left the house without checking yourself in the mirror at least 3 times? When was the last time you didn't worry about whether your hair looked okay, whether your outfit was right, whether people would judge your appearance? For most people, the answer is never. We've created this prison of self-consciousness that follows us everywhere we go. The ancient Stoics understood that our external appearance is what they called an indifference, something that has no bearing on our character or our ability to live a good life. Marcus Aurelius, who was literally the most powerful man in the Roman Empire, wrote extensively about not being attached to external appearances. He could have had the finest clothes, the best grooming, the most impressive image. Instead, he focused on his character and his actions. Here's what happens when you start experimenting with looking less than perfect in public. You realize that most people aren't paying attention to you at all. Everyone is so wrapped up in their own appearance anxiety that they barely notice yours. And the few people who do notice, their opinions have absolutely zero impact on your life. I remember when I was in university, I used to attend classes wearing pajama pants and flip-flops. Did it keep me from learning? Absolutely not. Did it affect my grades? Not at all. Did some people probably think I looked ridiculous? Probably. Did their thoughts about my pajama pants have any actual effect on my life? Zero. Now, let's be practical here. I'm not suggesting you show up to work looking like you just rolled out of bed if you want to keep your job. There are times when your appearance does matter for practical reasons. If you're in a client-facing role, if you're giving a presentation, if you're on a date, these are situations where how you look can have real consequences for your goals. But here's the key insight: most of the time, it doesn't matter nearly as much as you think it does. The grocery store, the gas station, walking your dog, picking up dry cleaning, these are perfect opportunities to practice not caring about your appearance. And the more you practice in low-stakes situations, the less power appearance anxiety has over you in high-stakes situations. Let me tell you about David, a software engineer in Seattle who used to spend 20 minutes every morning styling his hair before walking to the coffee shop on his block. One day, he was running late and just threw on a baseball cap. He was convinced everyone would stare at him, judge him, maybe even refuse to serve him coffee. You know what happened? Nothing. The barista smiled and made his usual order. The other customers were buried in their phones. Nobody cared about his hair. That small experience changed something fundamental for David. He realized he'd been carrying around this massive anxiety about something that existed only in his head. He started experimenting with caring less about his appearance in casual situations. He'd go to the gym without worrying about whether his workout clothes matched. He'd run errands without checking his hair in every reflective surface. He'd meet friends for casual hangouts without spending an hour getting ready. The result? David found himself with more time, more energy, and paradoxically, more confidence. When you're not constantly worried about how you look, you can focus on how you feel and what you're actually doing. You become more present in conversations because you're not thinking about whether your hair is still in place. You enjoy activities more because you're not worried about whether you look good doing them. This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about focusing on what's truly important. Your character, your actions, your relationships, your contributions to the world, these things matter. Whether your hair is perfectly styled when you're buying groceries. Not so much. But here's the deeper lesson: when you stop depending on external validation for your self-worth, you become genuinely more attractive to other people. There's something magnetic about someone who's comfortable in their own skin, who doesn't need constant reassurance about how they look. Confidence is attractive, and real confidence comes from knowing that your value as a person isn't determined by whether you're having a good hair day. Jessica in Brooklyn started small. She began by going to the bodega without makeup just once. Then she tried going to the laundromat in sweatpants. Then she went for a walk in her neighborhood wearing whatever was comfortable rather than whatever looked good. Each time she expected judgment, stares, maybe even comments. Each time, nothing happened. Gradually, Jessica realized she'd been living in a prison of her own making. She'd been so afraid of being judged for her appearance that she'd forgotten how to just exist comfortably in the world. The exercise didn't make her stop caring about how she looked entirely. She still dressed up for work, for dates, for special occasions. But it freed her from the tyranny of having to look perfect every single moment of every single day. The goal isn't to become someone who never cares about their appearance. The goal is to become someone who can choose when to care and when not to care, based on what actually matters in each situation. That's the difference between being controlled by your appearance anxiety and being in control of it. So here's your challenge. Pick one low-stakes situation this week where you normally spend time and energy on your appearance and just don't. Go to the grocery store with messy hair. Wear sweatpants to pick up your mail. Walk your dog without checking yourself in the mirror first. Notice what happens, or more accurately, notice what doesn't happen. 3. The power of no. How to stop being everyone's backup plan. Meet Rachel, a marketing coordinator in Denver who hasn't had a free weekend in 6 months. Not because she's working, because she can't say no to anyone. Friday night drinks with coworkers she barely likes? She's there. Saturday helping her neighbor move furniture? Absolutely. Sunday brunch with her college roommate's new boyfriend's sister? Of course. Rachel has become everyone's go-to person, their reliable backup plan, their guaranteed yes. And she's miserable. The second Stoic exercise for strategic indifference is learning to say no to social events, especially the ones you don't actually want to attend. This might sound simple, but for many people it's terrifying. We've been conditioned to believe that saying no makes us bad people, that declining invitations will lead to social exile, that our worth as human beings is measured by how available we are to others. Here's the uncomfortable truth: if you can't say no, your yes doesn't mean anything. When people know you'll always say yes, they stop valuing your time, your energy, and ultimately you. You become a convenience rather than a choice. You become the person they call when their first option falls through, the reliable backup who never disappoints because you never prioritize yourself. Rachel's breaking point came on a rainy Sunday when she found herself at a baby shower for someone she'd met exactly twice, holding a gift she couldn't afford, making small talk about diaper brands while internally screaming. She realized she hadn't chosen to be there, she'd just been unable to choose not to be there. There's a massive difference. The fear behind chronic yes-saying usually comes from abandonment anxiety. We're terrified that if we're not constantly available, constantly agreeable, constantly accommodating, people will leave us. This fear often has roots in childhood. Maybe you learned that love was conditional on being good, being helpful, being what others needed you to be. But here's what nobody tells you: the people who will abandon you for having boundaries are exactly the people you don't want in your life anyway. Let me tell you about Marcus, a teacher in Phoenix who used to say yes to every social invitation out of fear that people would stop inviting him. Work happy hours, weekend barbecues, birthday parties for people he barely knew. Marcus showed up to everything. He was exhausted, broke from constantly buying drinks and gifts, and paradoxically, lonelier than ever. Because when you're everywhere, you're really nowhere. When you're everyone's friend, you're nobody's close friend. The Stoics had a clear perspective on this. Other people's reactions to your choices are outside your control and therefore not your responsibility. You cannot control whether someone gets upset when you decline their invitation. You cannot control whether they understand your reasons. You cannot control whether they invite you again. What you can control is whether you make decisions based on your own values and priorities rather than your fear of other people's reactions. Marcus decided to experiment with selective participation. Instead of automatically saying yes to everything, he started asking himself 3 questions. Do I actually want to go? Do I have the time and energy? Will this add value to my life or relationships? If the answer to all 3 wasn't yes, he politely declined. The first few times were terrifying. When he skipped a coworker's birthday party to stay home and read, he was convinced everyone would think he was antisocial. When he declined a weekend camping trip because he needed time to recharge, he worried his friends would be offended. When he said no to drinks after work because he wanted to go to the gym, he feared he'd be excluded from future invitations. Here's what actually happened: nothing dramatic. Some people were mildly disappointed, but they got over it. A few people actually respected him more for having boundaries. And the people who got genuinely upset? They revealed themselves to be the kind of people who only valued Marcus for his availability, not for who he was as a person. But the real transformation happened in Marcus himself. When he started saying no to things he didn't want to do, his yes became more meaningful. When he did choose to attend events, he was fully present because he genuinely wanted to be there. His relationships became deeper because they were based on mutual choice rather than obligation. His free time became actually free, time he could use for things that mattered to him. This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about living according to your own values rather than external pressures. Every time you say yes when you want to say no, you're betraying yourself. You're teaching people that your time and energy are less valuable than their convenience. You're reinforcing the idea that keeping others happy is more important than your own well-being. Consider Sarah, a nurse in Atlanta who used to work every holiday because she couldn't bear to disappoint her coworkers. She missed family gatherings, romantic dinners with her partner, and quiet moments of rest because she was terrified of being seen as selfish. But what's actually selfish is expecting someone to sacrifice their own needs indefinitely for your convenience. Sarah learned to say, "I'm not available that day, but I hope you find coverage." No elaborate excuses, no apologies for having a life outside work. Just a simple, honest boundary. Some colleagues grumbled, but the schedule got covered. The hospital didn't collapse. And Sarah got to spend Christmas morning with her own family for the first time in 5 years. The key to saying no effectively is understanding that you don't owe anyone an elaborate explanation for your choices. "I can't make it" is a complete sentence. "That doesn't work for me" requires no justification. "I have other plans," even if those plans are staying home in your pajamas, is perfectly valid. Here's what happens when you start practicing strategic no-saying. You discover that most invitations aren't actually about you. They're about the other person's need to fill a spot, to have a certain number of people, to not feel rejected themselves. When you realize this, it becomes much easier to decline without taking it personally or making it personal. Rachel in Denver started small. She declined one invitation per week, usually something she was dreading anyway. She practiced saying, "Thanks for thinking of me, but I can't make it." No excuses about being busy, no promises to make it up later, no guilt-ridden explanations. Just a polite, firm no. The results were remarkable. Rachel's weekends became her own again. She had time for hobbies she'd abandoned, for rest she desperately needed, for the few relationships that actually mattered to her. And surprisingly, people didn't abandon her. The friends who truly valued her understood and respected her boundaries. The acquaintances who only saw her as a reliable yes person gradually stopped calling, which was actually a blessing in disguise. The most profound change was in how Rachel saw herself. She realized she'd been living as if her own needs and desires were less important than everyone else's. By learning to say no, she was really learning to say yes. Yes to herself, yes to her own life, yes to the idea that she mattered too. Remember, every time you say yes to something you don't want to do, you're saying no to something you do want to do. Every obligation you accept out of fear is an opportunity you're rejecting out of cowardice. Your time and energy are finite resources. Spend them intentionally. 4. Be the weird one. Why following the crowd makes you invisible. Imagine this. You walk into a trendy coffee shop in Austin and everyone, and I mean everyone, is wearing the exact same outfit. Black skinny jeans, white sneakers, oversized flannel shirts, and carefully messy buns. They're all ordering the same drink, talking about the same Netflix shows, and scrolling through the same social media apps. Now imagine one person walks in wearing bright purple pants, orders a hot chocolate instead of coffee, and pulls out an actual book instead of their phone. Who do you notice? Who do you remember? The third and final Stoic exercise for strategic indifference is deliberately doing the opposite of what everyone else is doing. This isn't about being contrarian for the sake of it, it's about breaking free from the invisible prison of peer pressure and discovering who you actually are when you're not trying to fit in. Let me tell you about Kevin, a software developer in San Francisco who realized he'd been living someone else's life for years. He wore the same tech bro uniform as his co-workers, went to the same trendy restaurants, had opinions about the same craft beers, and even adopted the same slightly condescending tone when talking about anything non-tech related. Kevin had become a human photocopy, and he didn't even realize it until one day he looked in the mirror and couldn't recognize himself. Here's the thing about peer pressure. It doesn't stop when you graduate high school. If anything, it gets more sophisticated and harder to detect. Adult peer pressure doesn't come with obvious bullying or direct threats. Instead, it whispers. It suggests. It makes you feel like you're choosing to conform when really you're just following an invisible script that everyone around you is also following. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus had strong feelings about this kind of unconscious conformity. He believed that most people sleepwalk through life, doing what everyone else does without ever questioning whether it aligns with their own values. He said, if you are able, then, by your own conversation, bring over that of your company to proper subjects, but if you happen to be taken among strangers, be silent. What Epictetus was getting at is this: either lead the conversation towards something meaningful or don't participate in meaningless chatter just to fit in. This was radical advice 2,000 years ago, and it's still radical today. Most people would rather engage in empty small talk about the weather than risk the social awkwardness of introducing a topic they actually care about. Think about the last group conversation you were part of. How much of it was a genuine exchange of ideas, and how much was just people saying what they thought they were supposed to say? How often did someone share a real opinion versus just echoing what everyone else had already said? How many times did you bite your tongue because your actual thoughts didn't match the group consensus? Kevin's awakening came during a team lunch where everyone was complaining about a new company policy. Kevin actually thought the policy made sense, but he found himself nodding along and adding his own complaints just to fit in. Later, he realized he'd spent an hour of his life pretending to be upset about something he wasn't actually upset about, just to avoid the mild discomfort of having a different opinion. That's when Kevin started his own experiment in strategic nonconformity. When everyone at lunch ordered the same trendy Poke Bowl, Kevin ordered a burger. When the conversation turned to the latest startup gossip, Kevin asked about someone's weekend hiking trip instead. When his coworkers all wore hoodies to the company retreat, Kevin wore a button-down shirt. Small acts of rebellion that gradually revealed who he actually was underneath all the conformity. The results were fascinating. Some coworkers initially seemed confused by Kevin's choices, but then something interesting happened. They started opening up more. When Kevin asked genuine questions instead of participating in gossip, people began sharing real stories about their lives. When Kevin wore clothes he actually liked instead of the uniform, others started commenting on how they were tired of dressing the same way every day. Kevin's small acts of authenticity gave others permission to be more authentic too. This is one of the hidden costs of conformity that nobody talks about. When you're constantly adjusting yourself to fit in, you rob other people of the chance to know the real you. And you rob yourself of the chance to connect with people who might actually like you for who you are, not who you're pretending to be. Let me tell you about Maria, a marketing manager in Miami who was part of a friend group that spent every weekend at the same beach club, drinking the same overpriced cocktails, taking the same Instagram photos, and complaining about the same relationship drama. Maria secretly hated it all. She preferred quiet bookstores to loud clubs, hiking to lounging, deep conversations to gossip. But she went along because that's what the group did. One Saturday, Maria decided to skip the beach club and go to a used bookstore instead. Her friends were confused, slightly offended, and very vocal about their disapproval. "You're being antisocial," they said. "You're changing," they complained. "You think you're better than us now," they accused. Maria almost caved and rejoined the group, but then she realized something important. Their reaction revealed more about them than about her. People who get upset when you stop conforming are usually people who are uncomfortable with their own conformity. Your authenticity holds up a mirror to their inauthenticity, and they don't like what they see. This is why choosing to be different often creates resistance, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you're doing something brave that others wish they had the courage to do. Maria's bookstore afternoon led to a conversation with a stranger about philosophy, which led to a friendship with someone who shared her actual interests, which led to a hiking group, which led to a completely different social circle of people who valued authenticity over appearance. Meanwhile, her original friend group gradually faded away, not because of any dramatic confrontation, but because they no longer had much in common. The Stoics understood that living authentically sometimes means living alone. They valued solitude over fake connection, truth over social comfort, character over reputation. This doesn't mean being antisocial or deliberately difficult. It means being selective about when to conform and when to stand apart. Here's a practical exercise. For 1 week, pay attention to every moment when you find yourself going along with the crowd. Notice when you laugh at jokes you don't find funny, when you express opinions you don't actually hold, when you participate in activities you don't enjoy just to fit in. Don't judge yourself for it, just notice it. Then pick one small way to be different each day. If everyone orders coffee, order tea. If everyone complains about Monday, mention something you're looking forward to. If everyone gossips about a coworker, change the subject to something positive. If everyone wears black, wear color. These tiny acts of nonconformity will gradually reveal who you are when you're not trying to be like everyone else. The goal isn't to be different for the sake of being different, it's to be yourself for the sake of being yourself. And sometimes being yourself means standing out from the crowd. Sometimes it means being the weird one. Sometimes it means choosing authenticity over acceptance. But here's what you'll discover: the people worth knowing will respect you more for being genuine, even if they don't always understand your choices. And you'll respect yourself more for having the courage to be who you actually are, rather than who you think you should be. Your new superpower: strategic indifference for maximum freedom. So here we are. You've learned why your brain won't stop caring what others think, discovered the hidden costs of people-pleasing, practiced looking imperfect in public, mastered the power of saying no, and embraced being authentically different. But this isn't really about not giving a fuck, it's about giving a fuck about the right things. Think about where you were when we started this journey. Maybe you were like Sarah in Chicago, spending 3 hours getting ready to buy groceries. Or Rachel in Denver, saying yes to every invitation while slowly losing herself. Or Kevin in San Francisco, living someone else's version of success. These weren't bad people, they were trapped people. Trapped by the invisible chains of other people's expectations. Strategic indifference isn't about becoming cold or uncaring. It's about becoming selective. It's about understanding that your attention, your energy, and your concern are precious resources that should be invested wisely, not scattered randomly to whoever demands them. When you stop caring about what strangers think of your appearance, you have more energy to care about your health and comfort. When you stop saying yes to every social obligation, you have more time to invest in relationships that actually matter. When you stop conforming to every group expectation, you discover who you really are and attract people who value authenticity over performance. This is your new superpower, the ability to choose what deserves your emotional investment. The Stoics called this wisdom, knowing the difference between what's important and what just feels urgent, between what's in your control and what's just noise. Here's what's going to happen next. You're going to face situations where your old patterns try to reassert themselves. Someone's going to judge your appearance, and part of you will want to spend an hour fixing what isn't broken. Someone's going to pressure you to attend an event you don't want to go to, and part of you will want to say yes just to avoid conflict. Someone's going to expect you to go along with the crowd, and part of you will want to conform just to feel safe. In those moments, remember this. Every time you choose authenticity over approval, you're not just changing your own life, you're giving other people permission to be authentic too. Every time you set a boundary, you're showing someone else that boundaries are possible. Every time you choose your own path, you're proving that alternative paths exist. The ancient Stoics believed that living according to virtue was the highest form of human achievement. Not wealth, not fame, not even happiness, but the courage to be who you truly are, the wisdom to focus on what truly matters, the justice to treat yourself with the same respect you give others, and the self-discipline to stick to your values even when it's uncomfortable. You now have the tools. You understand the philosophy. You've seen the exercises. The only question left is, what are you going to do with this knowledge? If this video helped you see yourself and your choices more clearly, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear this message. Subscribe to Stoic Vivu for more practical wisdom that actually works in the real world. Because the journey to authentic living isn't meant to be traveled alone, and neither is the path to true freedom. Your life is waiting. Stop asking for permission to live it.